Oh, Flynn, you beautiful, beautiful bean. Hey guys, what's up? It's Julie the Bibliophile, and today I am here to talk about Season 4, Episode 5 of The Librarians and the Bleeding Crown. I'm actually filming this after my review of Season 4, Episode 6 and The Graves of Time, because I had so much to say about Graves of Time, I wanted to get that out first. You can check the link in the description to check out my review of And the Graves of Time, but for now, let's talk about And the Bleeding Crown, because I loved both these episodes so much, and I loved so much about And the Bleeding Crown, and I want to talk about it. So we had two parts to this episode. We had the mystery of the librarians investigating this town where everybody was turning old, which I have to watch the episode again to get more of that because I wasn't paying as much attention to that. And then we also have the story of a librarian from the past, Darrington Dare, coming into the future and teaming up with Flynn and the librarians and fighting his arch nemesis. This episode was a big Flynn episode, and I appreciate that. Both episodes were big Flynn episodes, actually. At the end, The Graves of Time turned into a big Flynn episode, but, and I think it's because of what we saw in Bleeding Crown that Graves of Time becomes a Flynn episode for me. But Bleeding Crown was definitely a Flynn episode. I think how proud I am of Flynn in Bleeding Crown is what made Graves of Time hurt so much. But I just want to talk about Bleeding Crown. So, first of all, I loved everything about this because I loved Flynn fanboying over Darrington Dare. He was so cute. And, like, Eve thought it was so cute. And, like, I love it. I love seeing Eve love every part of him. I love seeing them love every part of and side to each other. It was so cute, and I can't stop talking about that. He was so sweet, and I love my Flynn. I love my Flynn so much, and, like, I just love seeing myself on screen, of course. So, Darrington Dare, the important thing to talk about with this episode is that Darrington Dare presents this idea to Flynn that there can only be one librarian, because if the librarians start warring with themselves, they are connected to the library, and if they war with themselves, they will cause a civil war in the library and do damage to the world, because a long time ago there was a civil war between two twin brothers who were librarians together, and their battle with each other caused the Dark Ages. Because they basically destroyed the library, they caused chaos, and because the library represents the world's knowledge, well, kind of hurting the library hurts the world's knowledge, and hence the Dark Ages. I also loved how protective Jenkins was of the library. So Dare is trying to tell Flynn, like, there can only be one librarian, and Jenkins is like, so Dare is telling the story of these two librarians, and Jenkins is like, oh yes, the library in its wisdom selected both of them. So Jenkins is reinforcing the idea, I think especially trying to reinforce the idea to Flynn, that, hey, you know, the library knows what it's doing. This time around, the library picked 4 librarians, and it's working out really well, and the library knows what it's doing. There was also Flynn's speech to Dare, which I want to talk about, how Flynn said that Darrington Dare was his hero. I'm gonna cry again. I cried when I talked about Flynn in The Graves of Time, and I'm gonna cry again, because the speech that Flynn made during this episode was so great. And I think is so in line with why I say the librarians is so important, and in line with how I say that Flynn is the first time I've ever seen myself on television, in a book, in anything. Flynn is the first time I've seen myself. The way Flynn talked about Darrington Dare is how I think about fiction. I think it's how a lot of us think about fiction. And I think it's what people who love fiction, but who don't have it as, like, their everything, it's what they don't understand. That's how you get people saying, like, you know, it's just a TV show, it's just a book. Because people who haven't had that connection can't even begin to fathom or understand how much these things mean to you. And what Flynn says to Dare about, he's like, I read everything about, I had no friends. When I first came to the library, I was alone and I had no friends. And I read all about you until you became like a friend yourself to me. That's kind of exactly what I would say to Flynn. That's kind of exactly what I would say to every character on the Librarians. a speech in the show The Middle, similar to this once, and I kind of like praised that speech as much as I praised this one. To see it validated, to have someone talk about how reading about a character, and even though Dare was a real person, how reading about someone that you don't know can make you feel not alone. How connecting yourself to a story makes you feel not alone when you are alone. I think to see that validated, to have someone say it and to not be told that they're weird or that it's wrong, and to have it presented that as the beautiful thing that it is so important. It's so important to show that on TV because so many people in the world don't get that. And what makes it worse is that when you make those connections, you feel wrong about it. You feel pathetic. And you have to learn. You have to learn how to feel okay with the fact that that you're defining yourself by fiction, that you're calling fictional characters your friends, that they feel like friends to you. And I think there's a stigma behind it to make it seem like a bad thing, but it's not. And to have Flynn talk about it on screen is so important to me. It just is such a part of who Flynn is. Oh. And tying in with how Flynn told Darrington Dare that he's his hero, we also had that really great section with the librarians talking about their different heroes. And, like, I love just, like, this was so in line with who they are. This little snippet of a scene was so in line with who the librarians are. So we have Ezekiel saying his hero is himself, because he's Ezekiel, and of course that would be true of him, right? We have Cassandra rambling on about a plethora of heroes in math and science, and she, like, excitedly says, like, you know, when you're a math person, you have a lot of potential heroes. And, like, cute, excited Cassie, it was so her. And then we have Jake talking about all these poets, these poet laureates, and, like, these scholars, and how they're his heroes, and, like, that's so Jake, and to have nerdy Jake excited about his intellect, and then also for Jake to say that when he was growing up, his hero was his dog. God, Jake. And Cassandra is, like, she's just like, that's so cool. Like, it's so sweet. It's so sweet. It's so cute. It's so them. I love it. I love every part of it. Ah! I also just had a horrible thought that, like, what does it mean about Jake that his hero was his dog? I mean, we know he didn't have a good relationship with his family, and, like, we know that he was abused as a kid, so was his dog, like, the only friend he had when he was growing up? God, that's dark. I didn't mean for this to get dark. It always ends up getting dark when we're talking about Jacob Stone, though, doesn't it? And then Eve. Oh my god, I loved the bit we got from Eve. First of all, more backstory from Eve. We're finally getting hints of backstory from Eve this season. We hear her talking about, her grandmother and how she used to watch movies with her grandmother. And we're hearing her talk about now how her mom and dad are her heroes. I love hearing about Eve's family and that she really had a good relationship with her family and does love them and that her parents are her heroes. And this is just redefining Hufflepuff Eve for me. Oh, it's so good. 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 Talking about this now, thinking I'm starting to hurt about Evelyn again. Oh no. But then Eve also saying when she was little her hero was Cinderella. It's adorable. It's just so adorable, and it's so in character for every single one of them. We have this whole idea of Darrington Dare trying to tell Flynn that there can only be one librarian. And what Flynn is telling Dare is that, you know, you don't understand. These people are my family. And, oh my god, what did he say? He said, like, oh yeah, and then he's trying to get Dare to not be alone and not give up when he's fighting the Nemesis guy. And Flynn says, like, you know, you're me. I've read all about you. You're an island. You're a loner. You're me when I first became the librarian. But then I met my friends and they saved my life. That's so exactly what the show is about. And that's, again, making me hurt more about what happened in Graves of Time and what Nicole did to Flynn in terms of doubt and me. I'm not going to talk about that now. Moving on. To hear Flynn talk about how important his friends are to him and how they saved his life is so important to me. And then we have this idea of how Flynn makes Darrington Dare believe that he doesn't have to be alone. And in the end, he saves his life. Because we learned that Darrington Dare died on his birthday fighting the Serpent Brotherhood because he was so alone that he was, like, upset about being alone on his birthday. And his guard was down. And so he died. And Flynn eventually saves his life. The history of the library changes. And he saves his life without warning him, so he doesn't violate causality, because what happens is the same succession of librarians still happens because Darrington Dare resigns, and he lives to be over 100 years old. And he lives a great life. He reconnects with his friends, and he doesn't die. And it reminds me of that episode of Doctor Who where they go to see Vincent van Gogh, except it has a happier ending. Because in Doctor Who, Vincent van Gogh does still die. But they do just add a little bright spot to his life. But Flynn helps someone else. Flynn helps someone else figure out that they don't have to be alone. That's so important. And I love it. I love every single bit of it. And then, you know, how Flynn has gone through such a journey. He's grown up so much because, you know, you would always think the idea was that the library always has to come first. And we see Flynn struggling with that the first 3 seasons. And now when Darrington Dare is saying the library is on the line, but the other librarians are dying, Darrington Dare is saying they're expendable, you have to let them die. And Flynn refuses. Flynn will let the library and the world get hurt before he hurts these people. And God is that important to see. And it's so Flynn. It's so Flynn. He's come so far, and I'm so proud of him. I'm so proud of him. I really, really am. And he loves them so much. He was so scared about losing Eve. He was so scared about losing all of them. I loved it. I'm probably not properly conveying how much I loved this episode, but I really did. And I love Flynn. And I love everything that's written for him. I love what was written for him in Bleeding Crown, and I love what was written for him in Graves of Time. I love seeing them work together. I love seeing Flynn go through countless journeys of doubt and backs and ups and downs and forwards and backs and setbacks and victories. Because that's Flynn. That's Flynn, and it's always been made clear that whenever Flynn screws up and then starts doing well again, it's always made clear that it's not permanent. And Eve says to him, like, you know, you've spent years working alone and you're gonna spend years adjusting. And now he's adjusting again. He has doubt that he has to work out, and he's adjusting. I love Flynn. I can't wait to see what happens for him next. I also got some nice Cassandra feels in this episode because, like, Cassie, like, screamed when, like, Jake got thrown back into the cabinet. Cassie, your hard eyes are showing. Guys, these 2 episodes were so good. This season just keeps getting better and better. I can't wait to rewatch them. I can't wait to pick them apart and analyze them. I can't wait to write to fix what happened at the end of 306. I'm sorry I'm not talking about Bleeding Crown much. I don't know why I'm not. I loved it. I just have so many feelings about Graves of Time now that I'm just stuck on that. But I did talk about what I wanted to talk about. I talked about Flynn because it was a very Flynn episode, and I think it's really, really important. And I really think everything that they're doing down at the Librarians, everybody involved in the team is doing such important work, is telling such an important story by telling the story of Flynn. And I really, really do hope we get a season 5 because this story needs to continue to be told. It needs to continue to be told. It really does. And so, with that, I'm gonna sign off for this episode talk. It's getting late. I'll have more to say in the coming days, of course, especially after I rewatch Bleeding Crown. Until next time, you can follow me on Tumblr, Twitter, and Instagram. All links are in the description below. Also in the description below is a link to my review of Season 4, Episode 6, and The Graves of Time. I cry in it, I yell at Nicole, I yell about Flynn. It gets real fun. Why don't you check it out? Please remember to like and subscribe if you liked this video, and please remember that next week we're not doing double episodes anymore, but we're still on Wednesdays at 8 o'clock for the rest of the season. Please remember to live tweet during the episodes and to be consistently tweeting at TNT Drama how much you want a Season 5 of the Librarians and how much you love the show. And together, we can get our Season 5. I know we can. I believe in us, Lits. But that's it for me this week. Until next week, stay magical, guys. I love you. Bye-bye.